Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of our Moms for Liberty Hamilton County, Tennessee podcast. I'm your host, Tanya, and I'm here with my co-host, Rebecca, and we are here for the kids. In today's episode, we are going to have tea together and take a break from the Marxist takeover of the public school system in America and in our county, and provide practical tips on how best to engage with your child's school. So let's talk about where we are now. In order to do that, we have to talk about the ugly elephant in the room, COVID and beyond. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience during COVID. For me, it was a nightmare, and I know it was for everyone else too. My son was a senior, and I was still teaching at that time. I had been very sick in February. I did not learn until later that I had had COVID in February, but I was really sick. And I went to 6 doctors before I got better. Finally saw an allergist that gave me 2 shots of steroids, 2 breathing treatments, a round of steroids to take home with me, 2 inhalers. At that point, when I went to the allergist, I told her if she didn't get me breathing, she needed to call an ambulance. So that's how sick I was. And just as I started getting better, that's when the lockdowns came. Everyone was sent home and told to get in touch with students. I'm speaking of the teachers, get in touch with students the best way they could. So I got home and started brainstorming on how to send assignments to all my students. I used their emails and created a Google meeting space and a Google phone number for them to keep in touch with me. Although I had some students who kept in touch and we would meet and go over the assignments I gave them, most of the rest of that school year was a wash. We did eventually get Zoom and I logged in and taught, but getting students to turn their cameras on so that I could see if they were participating or if they were sleeping, because that happened a lot, was the biggest issue. I was on the phone with parents constantly trying to teach them how to use the Chromebooks and the software that we were using for different classes. For me, I used Canvas as much as I could to put assignments in there and notes, but no one knew how to use Canvas at that point. Some students didn't even have Chromebooks, so it took weeks, even months, to get in touch with some of the students. I was on the phone day and night with parents trying to get in touch with them. I did find out that the students who had Chromebooks, many of them didn't want to turn their cameras on because they didn't want friends to see their home. That's what I found out. There were a lot of issues surrounding COVID and teaching during COVID. Also being a parent during COVID. My son was class of 2020. And so it was his senior year and he already had checked out before COVID even hit, and getting him to do work on Zoom was a nightmare. So I do understand from a parent's point of view also what that was like. All the senior events were canceled for that year. And I have told you in a previous podcast where graduation was in the middle of the summer with masks on in the football field. So none of that was fun for any of us. But I do think that that was a turning point for parents because they were able to get a glimpse into the curriculum that students were being taught. And not only did they get a perspective of the curriculum, they also found how much control the public school system actually has over their children instead of themselves. So I think that was a good thing that came out of COVID. There's not a whole lot of good that came out of it, but that was a good thing. So, Rebecca, what was your experience like through COVID?
During COVID, I did not have any children at home. I had grandchildren that were in the public school system. My daughter actually chose to remove her children from the public school system, and she drove them north to a county above where she lives because they did not have COVID lockdowns. It was business as usual at this school. Nothing changed. The kids didn't even know COVID was a thing. So she actually chose to homeschool for just a little bit. When she found out that the school one county above us was not participating in the COVID madness, she called them and they let her kids come to that school and finish out the school year in a non-COVID environment. I will say that the following year, when she came back to her homeschool and put her kids back in, there were a lot of stresses around masking. She had to remove one of her children due to an incident with masking. She has a little bit of anxiety and she could not wear a mask, and they humiliated her and made a spectacle. And so my daughter pulled that one child out and homeschooled, did virtual schooling actually that year. And that was tough because, kids are different and a lot of kids do not do well with virtual schooling. Some kids thrive that way, but a lot of kids, they just can't finish their assignments. So she did struggle a lot, but the school that her students were in was super communicative with her. She built relationships with those teachers. So it really wasn't a bad experience outside of Hamilton County as it was in Hamilton County. I know a lot of the smaller counties around Hamilton County were trying to mimic what Hamilton County was doing.
I think it's very interesting how quickly Hamilton County jumped on the virtual learning compared to other districts surrounding Hamilton County. It was like they were already ready for it.
Oh, yeah. It seemed like maybe Hamilton County already anticipated that this might be a thing. I've done a lot of research on their partners, and Hamilton County partnered with a lot of people around town for students to come in and do virtual learnings. Those students that maybe couldn't do it at home because they didn't have their parents at home, or maybe they just didn't do well in the virtual environment. There were a lot of churches, a lot of nonprofits who cashed in on the COVID money and helped with the students in the school. So yeah, I wonder too if Hamilton County had a heads up about what was going to go, what was going to happen
Well,
before
and
all the counties.
they instantly offered free internet for any students who didn't have internet. So I don't know. There's a lot revolving around that still unanswered. Even looking at, we had March, the lockdowns came, and like I said, I was trying to get in touch with students and parents and all of those things. Then the next school year started and we were all teaching online. We had Zoom by that point, and I was still having to be on the phone day and night with parents, teaching them how to use Zoom so they could teach their students how to use Zoom and how to find their assignments, because they wanted us to use Canvas for everything, for every assignment, for students to turn their assignments in on there. It took months just for the students to learn how to use the software on the Chromebooks, much less be learning the standards that I was trying to teach. So it was an interesting time. And for my son, I've talked about that before. He had a full scholarship to UTK. He went up there at 17 years old and was locked in his dorm, and he had to do his classes in there. When he went to get lunch or dinner, he got it in a box and got it got it and took it to his room. In the beginning, they were delivering it to the rooms. They couldn't come out of the rooms without a mask on. And that was really hard for him. So he came home, and he ended up going to UTC for a semester and did great, but they would not give him his grant or scholarship money. And he had a full scholarship to UTK. So that was hard for him. And he just said, I'm not taking out student loans. And I don't blame him. So right now he's getting ready for an apprenticeship. And I hope he does well in that trade. I really do. The things that I see that's going on college campuses now, I'm not sure that it was a horrible thing the way that things worked out. It's been hard, but God knows what's best for us, and he's going to put us on the right path. He always does. So,
well, Tanya, that sounds like a nightmare. And, you know, I think we talked about this during the last episode about the effect that COVID is going to have on the students going forward in their lives, what their opinion will be about public education, about college education. And I think you're correct that as horrible as COVID was, it accomplished a few things. It helped us to understand what was really going on in the school system. I had no idea when my kids were going to school how much control the school had over the children. I had no idea. And my kids went to school, 10 years before COVID. So I'm sure that these things were ramping up back then.
since our eyes have been opened, and that's one of the things, we're doing this podcast to get information out. It's hard on social media. All we see is people who disagree with us come and comment, and it's just a small group of people that just continually harass us. And there might be lawsuits in the future over that, especially targeting us as extremists and terrorists, because that's not what we are. We are parents who are concerned, and concerned citizens, because I don't have a child in the school system anymore, but I do have the experience of being a teacher in the past, and my son just coming out of that. And I have plenty of family members and friends who still have their kids are in the public school system, and I care about children in general. So going forward, I know that one of the things that I have said over and over, but I've not said it on this podcast, is where do we want to be? And what that looks like is parents need to be in the school every day. If a parent chooses to go to the school one time in the school year, and every parent decides to do that, there will be someone in that school keeping people on their toes every day. And if you go to the school and they say that you can't come in, they are lying to you. It is your right to go and observe your child at school anytime you want to. It's nice to make an appointment, but I'll tell you, if you make an appointment, things will be planned accordingly, and the day will not go the way that it would if you were to just show up. And I suggest that every parent does that.
Think back to when we went to school. I remember having your parent come to school to eat lunch with you, made you the popular kid. Everyone would come around you. Everybody wanted to sit with you because your parent was there. I was raised by a single mother, and my parent wasn't able to come to school and eat with me. But sometimes, maybe it happened. Maybe I had my sister come, or my dad could get off work and come. That was an exciting thing for the kids. And I can always remember a parent being in the classroom helping, parents that stayed at home, parents that didn't have to work. There was always a mother in the classroom helping. And that was Hamilton County school system. I mean, that was the experience for everyone that's been through the Hamilton County public school system until recently, until the last couple of superintendents, from what I understand.
Right. I can remember growing up and there always being parents in the school, and we love that. And It was a good way for kids to also get to know each other outside of the school, because parents who came into the school, other parents got to know each other, and it was just a good thing. It was a good thing for the community. I do remember even a couple years before COVID, and it did have to do with administrators. It just depends on who it is, but I was told to keep the parents out of the classroom at all cost. And when I was told that, I can imagine the look on my face when that was said to me, because I thought that's not how this is supposed to go. So I had already started struggling with the whole parent public school friction that's happening, and I still don't understand it. I mean, I do, but we've talked about Marxism enough. So
Well, I really think, just thinking over our society in general, I remember when there was a shift in the churches and things changed in the churches and the older people were kind of marginalized and pushed to the side. I just kind of feel like our society is shifting. I know we've talked about this a lot, and it's shifting so that the people who want to be in power can be in power. They're trying to get the people who are holding them accountable out of the way. That's the way I see it. I mean, not just in the schools, in the government, in the churches, in society in general. There is a push for the citizens to just sit down, be quiet, follow the rules, do what we say. Everything's going to be okay. But we realized because of COVID, thank God for COVID, never thought we'd hear that, but we realized because of COVID that everything's not going to be okay if you sit down and stay quiet.
and I think we're at a point, used to, if 2 years ago, if you and I had done this podcast, it would have been, oh, that's all conspiracy theory. But there's so many people that realize now that that is exactly what we're up against. And, with us being labeled as we have been, I mean, we're just a group of parents that want other people to know what's going on. We're not doing anything wrong. We're supposed to be engaged in our community as citizens. And I really do hope that other people start to get engaged. We can't do this on our own. That is one of the things that I said the other night to everyone in our small group that we talk to about what's going on in the schools and what's going on in Chattanooga and what's going on in Hamilton County. We can't do all of this. Parents and teachers are going to have to start standing up and speaking out. And I know the fear that comes with that. But if we all stand up together at one time and say, this is not okay, this is not age appropriate for kids, let's get back to the basics. If we did that as a community, it would be done.
And standing up and demanding that they follow policy and they follow procedure and they govern in a moral way is not being an activist. That is our responsibility as United States citizens to engage in our civic duty. It doesn't mean we have to go out and protest. It doesn't mean we have to cause a stink, but we should be engaging with our elected officials, with our school board members, with anyone who is in a position of power over the finances, over your tax money. We should be engaging in that and figuring out what is going on, what are you spending my money on, and do I agree with that? And if I don't agree with it, I need to let them know that I don't agree with it, and I need to let them know why. And there's ways to do that, and that's why we wanted to get on here today specifically about parent and community engagement in the schools. You don't have to be a parent to engage in the school system, but if you are a parent, you're considered a quote unquote stakeholder. I hate that word, but you are considered to have a leg up on just the regular taxpayer. So we're going to try to give you some tips on how to navigate the system, because it is a system. It's not It's not an easy system to navigate, but and they're not in the business of building relationships with you. They are in the business of keeping you out, just like Tanya said. But we can help you navigate this system and build a relationship with them, whether they want it or not.
So one of the tips that we already covered was, if you are a parent, get in the school, even if it's one day of the school year. If you can do 2 days of the school year, that would be amazing. If every parent would do that, go and hang out at your kid's school, look at what is hung up on the walls in the classrooms, look at the books that they're studying through, listen to what's being said, watch the behavior of the students between each other, the relationships between the teachers and the students. There's a lot of good teachers still left in this district, and they are hanging on by a thread. They need the parents' support. So that is one of the first things that I would say needs to be done. Another thing that you can do, school board meetings. I never went to a school board meeting. Well, I'll take that back. The first year I taught, I wasn't made, but I was told that since I was a first year teacher, I needed to go to school board meetings, and I had to take notes at those school board meetings. And I took them back and typed them all up, and I sent them out to all the teachers in the school that I taught at. But after that, I quickly realized that it was not the teacher's place to be at the school board saying anything.
Oh yeah, we've seen that. We've seen evidence. If teachers show up with a grievance to the school board, they're either a union patsy, they're either in with the union and they're protected, or they're going to get disciplined. We saw a group of teachers come in last year with some issues about pay, and the admins turned around. You could tell they were taking note of who was in the room, and I just wonder what happened after that school board meeting.
Well, we've even talked to husbands and wives of teachers who have gone and spoken at the school board, and their husband or wife that works for the school system that teaches was reprimanded after they spoke at the school board meeting. So parents, community members of Hamilton County, citizens, taxpayers, school board meetings are very important for you to be at. I know it's not a fun gathering, but it is something that we all have to do. We go to the school board meeting, we sit and we take notes. Once you start going to school board meetings, you will start to see everything that we are trying to tell you. And it's the third Thursday of every month. They start at 4:30. And the session at 4:30 is where you can come and speak. If you want to speak on your own topic, you have to email the week before to get on the schedule, and you'll be sent back a confirmation that you've been put on the schedule. And then if you are not able to sign up the week before, then you can come at 4:00 on that Thursday and sign up there. But whatever you speak on has to be on the agenda for that night. Rebecca, who do they email to get put on the schedule to speak?
So you would email the board secretary, Sherry Ford. We'll put her email address in this podcast. And just to clarify, if you sign up ahead of time, you can speak on anything you want. You have First Amendment free speech rights. You can come and tell them a poem or sing them a song. I don't know if anybody knows Alex Stein. You can dress up like a chicken.
Will the real Dr. Fauci please stand up? Please stand up.
But if you wait, they have this policy that they've put in place. And I think it was because Moms for Liberty came that first year and lined a bunch of people up to read all the explicit reading material that's in the schools, and they did not like that. So they changed the policy, and now not only have they backed the delegation time up to 4:30, which is extremely inconvenient for most parents in this county that work. It's hard to get down there. You have to leave work early. You have to find somewhere to put your kids. It is an inconvenience, and they did that on purpose, I believe. Marco has even mentioned, he's one of the school board members, he's even mentioned that he doesn't agree with the 4:30 delegation time, and he wishes that they would move it to 6 o'clock. But if you do miss sending an email to Sherry, you can show up, like Tanya said, at 4 o'clock, sign in, but you have to speak about something that is on the agenda. And if you need help, reading the agenda, we can help you. If you want to speak at the school board, we can help you do that, because there's always something on the agenda that you can jump off of if you have an issue.
Yes, and if you decide you're going to come on that third Thursday and you haven't signed up, just get in touch with us, email us, and we will get the agenda to you and help figure out a way for you to be able to speak. The time limit for you to speak is 5 minutes, but you can still get your point across in 5 minutes. So that is another place where we need people. Not just Moms for Liberty, but the community of Hamilton County needs people to start showing up. You need to let your presence be known, not just for the school board members, but for the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, and all of the central office employees to know that what is happening in the school system, what decisions they are making that you care about, and what you have to say about it, because that is important. So, Rebecca, we had a meeting with Justin this summer, and we haven't talked about that at all, but I would like for you to talk about what he said in our meeting when we were talking about parents being in the schools again.
Yeah, we had a meeting with Justin. We met him at a local school here in our county, and Moms for Liberty went and sat down with him for about 2 hours. He spent a lot of time with us, and we went over a list of concerns that we have. And we did mention parent involvement in the school system. And he said that he has made it 100% clear to his admins and his principals that parents are back in the schools, that they should be scheduling parent engagement nights. Every school should be bringing the parents in, and that the way it sounded was that this is a requirement, and he is adamant that parents be back into the school system. So I hope that the administration follows his lead. I do know that principals set the tone for the school. Like, that is just a known fact. Everything rises and falls on leadership. If you have a good principal, you have a good school. If you have a bad principal, you have a bad school.
The longer I'm on the board, the more I see the most important person in any school is a principal. Mm-hmm. Actually, you can tell by walking in the front of the school whether the principal's has it going on or not. Mm-hmm. You just can. When you walk into the front door of the school, you can look around and you can see things that are taken care of, things that are not taken care of. They're the captain of their ship there.
And there are principals that do not follow what Justin says. Principals are also autonomous, so they run their schools the way they want to run their schools. They set the culture in their schools. They set the tone for the way they treat their teachers. There's really not a system-wide policy on how principals should run their schools. And I understand, different communities have different needs, but there is definitely a discrepancy between certain schools and the way they treat their staff, the way they treat their parents, and other schools. Other schools are super involved with their parents. They reach out to their parents every week or anytime anything happens. And then you hear stories about parents that find out about things that happen in the school. The principal never notifies the parents. They won't call them back. So that is something that I think Justin should work on. But from what we understand, he is pushing for parent engagement nights in the schools.
I think it's interesting. I will say that we hear him use that word autonomous very often. And he says that, even, for example, the phone policy that just went into place, but they have autonomy on students using them during lunch. That's just an example. But the word autonomy is used quite often when referring to administrators or principals of schools. So it'll be interesting to see how different this plays out at different schools with parent engagement nights.
Yes, it will. And I know working in the private sector, in corporate, autonomy oftentimes will ruin your company. If you have multiple offices running things in different ways, you will quickly find out that customer satisfaction is going to be very poor. I mean, it's just the same as going to a fast food restaurant. If you went to one Kentucky Fried Chicken and Dalton and then came to a different one in Dayton and the food was completely different, that's autonomy.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we're seeing that play out in the public school system here. What about PTA groups? Is that still a thing? Because I
I
did
really
not.
don't know. I think it is in some schools. I think there are strong PTA, parent teacher, used to be PTSA, the
Mhm.
students were involved.
Right.
Yeah, I think some schools are still doing that. I know the school that my granddaughter was enrolled in last year and the year before said they have a PTA. They raise money for PTA, but there's never a PTA meeting. So you pay your dues at the beginning of the year and you sign up for the PTA and you never hear from them again. And I'm not saying that they're not doing good work and they're not spending that money on things that need to be done in the schools, but I think PTA is a misnomer. It's more just like a booster club or a fundraiser from what I've seen.
Well, used to PTA meetings were once a month or once a quarter or something like that. I remember that, but it's definitely dropped off. Them taking money and not having a meeting or doing anything. And they may be doing good things with the money, but I think that parents should be in on that conversation since it is a PTA group.
Yep. And I know of one other school in our county that I've gotten information on an open records request where a public official, an elected official, is their PTA president or secretary or something. So, you know, just kind of wonder what the PTA's purpose really is nowadays in Hamilton County.
That's interesting information.
You want to talk about student-led clubs?
Student-led clubs. Let's talk about that a little bit. There are clubs in the schools that I do believe parents should know if their child is taking part in that club. As a parent, I would want to know. And I think that it needs to be any club during the day, after school hours, anytime that's related to the public school system, the parents should be notified and the parents should have to give permission for the child to participate in that club. I don't know what Hamilton County's policy is right now on that. I have done an open records request, but I have not gotten information back on that. So, do you have more information on that, Rebecca?
No, all I have is questions. I remember when I was in school, clubs were also a big thing, exciting. If you were in a club, you were in with your people and you got your picture made. You were in the annual or the yearbook. And I just wonder if all the clubs that are currently being held in the Hamilton County school systems are administered the same way. I wonder if those kids are getting their pictures made and put in the annual, and if everybody in the school knows what kind of club everybody's in anymore.
What we are going to do regarding clubs, we're coming up with a form that you can fill out and send to your child's school. So let's talk about that. Data trails, documentation. If you have certain things that you want for your child or you do not want for your child, it needs to be in writing. You need to send it in an email and you need to deliver it in person and make sure that they make a note in Power School that that is what you want or do not want. And we will get that information out to you through our newsletter and on social media and our website. We have someone that's coming up with a form right now that you can use that form if you want to, or you can go from that form and write what you want. But if you have problems with your child in the school system, keeping the documentation from the beginning all the way through is very important. And the principal, and if it's a teacher, whatever the issue is, they need to see your face, or you need to make a phone call. I would even say record it. You've got to keep the documentation on what is happening. I've had too many friends that have had to pull their kids out of schools because they're getting beat up and they didn't have the documentation to prove everything that they needed to. So you need to keep up with all of that.
I'll just give you some feedback on how to keep that documentation. If you don't want to record, if you don't want to, you could go into a meeting or you could have a telephone call with someone. The state of Tennessee is a one-party recording state, I think. I'll look that up to make sure, but as long as one person on the telephone call knows that they're being recorded, you can record. You don't have to go at it that way. But what I do, and what I've always done, is if it's an important call, I take copious notes. I take notes almost word for word of what the person that I'm talking to is discussing, the questions that I'm asking. And those notes are admissible in court. If you keep a diary a day after day after day, and then something happens, your diary is admissible in court. And your notes are too, especially if they line up with what this person has said in front of someone else or, publicly. I know I've got notes about some things that the school board attorney has discussed with me, and I've documented that myself, of course, when I had the phone conversation, but I've also talked to him about it face to face, and we've had emails back and forth since then. So I've got 2 or 3 different proofs of what we've talked about, and it all lines up. So you don't have to record people. Some people record everything. So just be careful what you say, because especially if you're dealing with a school system and you're inside of a school building, you're more than likely being recorded.
Since we're talking about students and documenting things that happen with a student in the public school system, what about the conversation that feeling that our students are safe at the schools?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, and I think if I had to do it all over again, and I was going to put my kids into a public school system, I was young when I had kids, and, I didn't do a lot of research. I trusted the public school system. I put my kids in the schools and trusted that the teachers were going to teach them how to read, write, do math, and that they were going to grow up and have a good job someday. But I don't think we can do that anymore. What I would do is I would just make a list of questions. I would just sit down with myself before school started, or with my spouse, and just ask, what do I currently think of the school system based on what I see in the mainstream media, based on what my friends have told me, based on what I hear from family members? Do I trust my student at that school? Do I trust that my student is going to be safe at that school? I know that a lot of people are hearing the same things over and over again. Like you said, Tanya, with the bullying, we hear that from everybody. We hear that from our friends, from our neighbors. We hear that at the school board. So just keep in mind, what are you repeatedly hearing about the schools from your friends and neighbors? And write all this stuff down, because you can have conversations with the teachers. You can have conversations with the principals. I know when my granddaughter was in school for the last couple of years, we went and met a couple of her teachers, and they knew who I was. They knew that I was associated with Moms for Liberty. So I just asked questions. I asked questions about the reading material, just what I knew the hot topics were. I asked those questions. Bring it up and let them tell you what their position is. They're not all bad people. I did run into some administrators and teachers who we're a little bit combative. I mean, I'll admit that. And you just have to learn how to navigate this system as a parent, because you're coming in from the outside. They're already prepped and ready to deal with you, especially if they know you're coming. So what you need to do is, like Tanya said, document, document, document. If your kid comes home and tells you that they've been bullied, sit down with that child and have a conversation and write it all down. And then, we're going to go through the different levels of contact that you have access to in the school system. We're going to actually start with your very last resort and then go all the way back down to the teachers, because we feel that building relationships is number one, most top priority that you need to work on if you have a child in the school system, because they are not going to be actively building relationships with you most of the time. There are some teachers like Tanya who are left in the school system who will call you proactively and will try to communicate what's going on. But most of them are not doing that anymore. Another thing that I think you can do is tap into the other parents. I know that PTA is not rocking and rolling anymore, but there are ways to get in contact with parents. If you go to the initial meet and greet at the school with this parent engagement thing that Justin is talking about, just sit down with somebody that you don't know, introduce yourself, try to form a couple of small groups, maybe get a text message string going with some of the students, parents in your child's grade, or maybe some people that you do know, just try to get a little group going. And that way, if you do have an issue, you'll have a support network to tap into. And depending on how big the school is, word gets around. Everybody knows everybody else's business. So you'll be able to find out if this is just a one-off situation or if there's really something going on, if you're in contact with other parents. Also explore your talents and figure out how you can engage with the school system. So if you've got something to offer them, offer it up. And if they accept you with open arms, then that's a good way to gauge who you're dealing with, whether you've got a friendly or a non-friendly. If they say, we've got somebody taking care of that already. And I can give you a specific example on how that worked out for us a couple of years ago. Then you might be dealing with someone who is not open to community involvement. And you can still force your way in, but you don't want to have to force your way in. You want to be able to just have a smooth, easy relationship back and forth with the school system, especially at the admin level, because if you do have an issue, that's where you're going to end up.
So we're talking about parents who are able to be in the schools during the day. That's few and far between. We understand that. That's why I said if you can get to the school 2 times during the day in a year, that would be amazing. But we're also talking about communication outside of those school hours. You can use email. If you need to have a phone call with a teacher, they're supposed to be available. And if they if they say that they're not taking calls outside of school hours, because there are many, many teachers who say that, then they have to schedule a time during the day to have a phone conference with you. They are supposed to do these things. So if you're having a hard time getting in with a meeting or anything like that, please let us know about that. Also, I want to bring this up. They went ahead and hired the SEED coaches. We've talked about that multiple times. They changed the name of them. They're called coaches now. But I will tell you that social emotional learning is counseling without counseling degrees. And so we have heard from children already and parents that they are seeing counselors multiple times a week, sometimes every day. You need to ask your children how many times they are seeing a counselor and what is being discussed. And that's one of the things you can add in the letter to the school at the beginning of the year. You don't want your child to see the counselor unless you know about it, unless you are informed, and unless you consent to it. At some point in public school life, every student sees a school counselor. So we're not saying that school counselors are a bad thing. What we are saying is that this whole child model includes unlicensed psychology, and we do not agree with that. That's not what schools are there for. They are there to teach math, science, reading, writing, social studies, history, all the things that we grew up learning. That's just not what's happening now. So you need to talk to your students and ask them about how much they are seeing counselors and being talked to with the counselors, and what the conversations, the topics that they are talking about.
Yes, we love counselors. We are not trying to villainize counselors. Counselors have a very hard job, and in the teachers and counselors' defense, they should not have to be calling parents after hours when they aren't being paid. But that's what teachers do. My stepmother was an English teacher, and my memories of her when I would go to my dad's on the weekend is she would be grading papers. She had papers all over the table. And we know that's what teachers do. Teachers make sacrifices, and, they're scheduled for 10 hours a day at that school, but they're probably working 14 hours a day, where they're going home and taking care of their business with their family. And then later on the night, I've heard stories of teachers that have to constantly be getting on their cell phone because these kids are taking these tests on Edgenuity, the ones that are trying to test out of school and not finish their actual graduation requirements. And they're getting locked out of these tests, and the teachers are or the counselors actually are constantly having to log these kids back in, and it's breaking into their family time. We know that these teachers and counselors are making sacrifices, but we also know that the school system is hiring people from outside of the state of Tennessee, and I'm talking like Midwest and West, people that are coming in to our county that do not know our culture, that are here for a reason. They're bringing them here because of this social emotional push in the school. I was going to go over, Tanya's talking about the seed coaches, and they did change the name of the seed coach, and they did try to stress during one school board meeting that, it's just a position where they're going to be coming in and they're just going to pat the kid on the back. Some kids need a pat on the back every morning when they come in. Some kid, they might have a bad day with their mom in the morning, and they come in and they're in a bad mood. And this seed coach is just going to be the person that comes up beside the kid and reassures them and gives them a high five and sends them on their way. Like, that's how they want everybody to look at these seed coach positions. Is that really what they're going to be doing, Tanya?
I'm going to read from, this is from the Hamilton County website. Social, emotional, and academic development, which is SEED, which we've already talked about. And this is what it says. The social, emotional, and academic development, SEED, department includes school counseling, social workers, 504 plans, mental and behavioral health support, student success planning, and college and career advising. Hamilton County Schools supports social, emotional, academic development by providing direct and indirect student services as well as classroom instruction. Visions and beliefs of SEED. All students deserve to learn in an environment where they feel connected, safe, and encouraged to achieve. These social, emotional, academic development structures will create and integrate sustainable, high-quality SEED processes and help increase students' opportunities for deeper connections to their peers, educators, and school community. Educating the whole child. We've talked about this before. It's not the school's place to educate the whole child. That is the family unit's job. But the school system and the government tend to believe that it is their job, just like Karl Marx believes that it's the government's job. Anyways, this says this is the premise of SEED and is a systemic and integrated approach to learning. It requires rethinking teaching and learning so that students' academic, social, emotional, and cognitive development are integrated throughout the day. Fundamental to learning are environments that support the whole child by being physically and emotionally safe. Young people with strong social, emotional, and cognitive competencies are more likely to enter and graduate from college and succeed in their careers. And the Aspen Institute 2019 is referenced there.
Stop right there. The Aspen Institute, which I did not know that until we just looked at this. I did not realize that Hamilton County was going to be so bold in referencing the Aspen Institute. They have an administrator who we will be doing a podcast on, a deep dive, just to let everyone know who is in the Hamilton County school system. They have an administrator that is connected to this Aspen Institute through, I believe it was a committee. I'm not looking at it right now. It's listed on the resume of this person. I mean, Tanya, I really think they must have taken your speech about Karl Marx and social emotional learning and written this social, emotional, and academic development portion of their website, because you could probably line this up with the speech that you gave, calling them out on Marxification of the public school system. I mean, it's all right here.
That's what it looks like to me. And it's amazing to me that they looked at me and said, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, you mentioned Linda Darling Hammond in your speech several times because she is, I don't know, the mother of this stuff. I guess the academics worship the ground that she walks on. This administrator that we're going to be doing a deep dive with was involved in something with the Aspen Institute, and Linda Darling Hammond was the co-chair. And they can't say that they're being trained by a Marxist and not say that that is spilling over into the school system that they're adminning, can they? I mean, your worldview goes with you everywhere you go. You can't turn that off, especially when it's right here laid out. I mean,
no, they're not. They know what they're doing. That's what they've been trained to do, and they are coming in and they are finding teachers that are on board. I would like for Rebecca to show the video of the EL education director from South Carolina and what she was saying to the person who was recording her and how she was trying to get him to be a co-conspirator.
I work with school leadership teams to help improve schools and providing curriculum support. So we look at a number of data points around equity. My organization has worked with Meadow Glen Elementary, River Bluff, Lexington Middle, which is now Lakeside. So the leadership teams at the schools that I just named, familiar, like with, they currently work with my organization. We are working on a curriculum, but the curriculum, it is really about, it's inclusive of culturally relevant teaching. And so some of the topics that we explore are going to be topics that mainstream, that kind of go against mainstream teaching. It's going to begin with your school leadership team before it can go on to your school staff. I would first start with an assessment of what are your beliefs about the state of affairs in this country? Like, what do you think? Tell me about your privilege. Do you enjoy any privileges? What parts of your identity are privileged? So I would ask that to you, Adam. What parts of your identity are privilege? As a white male, here are some of the privileges that I enjoy, but it starts with that kind of conversation because this is really heavy stuff for people who as soon as they see this, they're turned off. So this is really academic. For example, culturally relevant pedagogy. Academically, that's the term, culturally relevant pedagogy. But when we start walking into school doors, we spend less time calling it that and more like respecting students' cultures or bringing the culture into the classroom and honoring and respecting them. Tenets of critical race theory are race is a social construction, race is endemic, it's actually normal. Counter narratives is this idea that so you're reading the United States Constitution, every time you read the Constitution, you're going to read a counter narrative that is by some person of color, and they will give you their experience. Critical race theory is usually like law and legislation. So the law might say all men are created equal. All people in this country over the age of 18 have a right to vote, right? My counter narrative would say, as someone who lives in Atlanta, my governor is making it harder to vote. And so for every law, there's a counter narrative, but no one wants to hear the counter narrative. Well, the thing is, back in 94, we knew that this wasn't going to happen. Now we realize in 2022, like, you have some people who are willing to be allies, and you have some people who are willing to be co-conspirators. An ally is someone who says, yeah, that's right. I think that this is something that this would benefit our students. It would benefit everyone. Let me know if you need any help with that, right? That's an ally. A co-conspirator is, I'm willing to do this work in my classroom, even if I get in trouble, and have conversations. I think you're absolutely right about like not using the term critical race theory, because that's going to be a turn off, or in terms of getting people to sit down and listen, that will close off ears, because so many people have heard it now and it has been linked. You don't have to talk about me, just talk about EL. They know EL in this district. It's at a number of schools. My passion lies around equity in any form or fashion, and providing a space where all people, particularly people of color, people who who have an identity that is not mainstream, that does not enjoy privilege, to be able to thrive and be successful. That's where my passion lies. Where can I, as a person who does not identify with any of the identities that enjoy privilege, where can I thrive and be successful? That's it. Sometimes classrooms are not spaces where LGBTQIA children feel safe. Sometimes classrooms are not places where Muslim children feel safe. Sometimes classrooms are not spaces where children of color, particularly Latinx or Black children or Native American children, feel safe. I just want to change it to safe spaces.
These people, I was thinking a minute ago when I was making a glass of tea, how careful we are being on this podcast, because we are trying to tread lightly, but we have some information that there are some very big players that have been put here on purpose to completely turn things upside down from what we have known in public education. And we've been trying to say it as nicely as possible, but it is so interesting to me that they have just clearly put on their website that that's who they support, the Aspen Institute. And we know that they do, because like you said, one of the admins has a connection there. and we will talk about that soon. Since they've been so bold to put it on their website, we might as well just go ahead and talk about that. It asks, what are the benefits of social, emotional, and academic development to students? Hamilton County schools prioritize the development of social, emotional, and academic skills in the classroom. Teachers structure classrooms to include core seed competencies of cognitive, social, and interpersonal and emotional development.
And these people are going to be seed coaches that are going to be implementing cognitive development, social and interpersonal development, and emotional development. And I specifically remember them stating, Justin Robertson stating in a board meeting, that you don't have to be a counselor to be a seed coach. You might just be from Girls Inc. I mean, you can be an admin from Girls Inc., get a job as a seed coach, making $70,000 a year, and now you are in a position to where you are practicing counseling without a license, because cognitive development, social and interpersonal development, emotional development, that's what I talk to my counselor about. That's what I pay to talk to my counselor about. That's medical. That's behavioral health services.
And we already know what it's like with the surveys. Parents are not notified. They're not told what the questions are. It is a law that they are supposed to be notified what questions are going to be on that survey 2 weeks before it's given. They're not notified about the survey. So they're definitely not going to be notified about what these counseling sessions are about. At the end of this, it says emotional development. Students recognize and manage one's emotions, understand the perspectives of others, and empathize with them, including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures.
Isn't that what you learn from your mom and your dad and your church? Isn't that what your family teaches you?
In your community. I'm frustrated with finding this during our
I didn't know
podcast.
we were going to go off track like this, but I mean, we can't even have a podcast where we are trying to be light and soft and fuzzy and help parents navigate the system of the school system without being confronted with Marxism. I mean, this is not a conspiracy, folks. This is in the public school system in Hamilton County, Tennessee, and your property taxes are paying for it. I need some Hamilton County commissioners to wake up and contact the school system and ask them, why are they pushing all of this DEI mess on these kids? I mean, the Attorney General in Tennessee just came out with a statement that says he is putting pressure on the top 100 employers in the state of Tennessee to stop all of this DEI stuff because it's illegal. You can't do this. You can't force these things onto people.
Let's talk about the school board. If you can't make it to school board meetings, you can find out who your school board member is, who represents you, who is your county commissioner. You need to get in touch with them. They were elected. They are elected officials. They need to hear from you. Get their phone number, get their email, get their address, write them a letter, try to set up a meeting with them, talk to them about what matters to you.
Yes, they are your advocates. They are your elected representatives. They have responsibilities to the community. It's funny, the very first delegation that I ever gave to the school board, I had no connection with Moms for Liberty at that time. I was just a concerned citizen. I had shown up at a school board meeting in September and heard all of these horrible books. I heard about the Declaration of Independence being taught as a racist document. I was very concerned with what was going on in the school system. And I was watching a podcast of someone who was running for governor in Georgia, and she was explaining how, it's our civic duty. We need to be engaged with our elected officials. We need to tell them that they're not little kings and queens. They have a responsibility to the community. So I sat down, never spoke before a school board before. Probably had never, I've been maybe to 2 school board meetings in my entire life before that. And I just sat down and wrote a delegation. And I went, and nobody knew me from Adam's House Cat except for Joe Smith, because I used to go to church with him. And I just went over their policies. They have policies that put them in a position where they have a legal requirement to engage with the community. So I'm just going to go over these policies real quick, just a very high level, just so everybody understands the school board is there for the community. The legal status of the board is to be an instrument of the state, and members of the board are state officers representing local citizens and the state in the management of the public schools. Okay, that does not say they represent teachers. It does not say that they represent Justin or any superintendent or any admin. Yes, they represent them as taxpayers, but they are not advocates of the school system. They are advocates of local citizens and the state. And just so we're clear, the state oversees the school system, and oftentimes the state will insert themselves into a local county school system if they're not doing the right thing. The state has threatened to come take over schools in Hamilton County before, and the county doesn't like the state. So for the school board to be upholding their legal status according to what they were elected for, they should be representing local citizens, and that's how it's written in their policy. Local citizens is first, and then the state. They are servants of residents within the boundaries of the school system. They're servants. They're not kings and queens. All these people that are elected, they are our servants. We call them, we tell them what we like and don't like about how they're handling the government, and then they advocate for us. And they get things changed if things need to be changed. They're servants. Their duties are to provide adequate and direct means for keeping the local citizenry informed about the schools, and for keeping itself and the school staff informed about the needs and wishes of the public. That is what is written in their policy. Do you think that they're doing that? Do you think that Tiffany Robinson, the board member who is the chair right now, is providing adequate and direct means for keeping the citizenry informed, that's us, about the schools, and also keeping the school staff informed about the needs and wishes of the public? I have seen her get up and walk out of board meetings throwing hissy fits more than once.
She's not even doing her job as the chair of the school board, because there was the issue with the grading policy that came up recently that Larry Grome brought to the public's attention, and they were talking about him having an ethics violation by doing that. That is his job, to bring information to the public. But he even said that he emailed her and Justin Robertson before, so she knew about it, and some of the school board members didn't know about it. But as the chair of the school board, if she got that email with that information, she should have shared it with the school board so they could come together to discuss it. That's her job. She's not doing her job. There's a lot of them that are not doing their job.
That's a very good point, Tanya. I didn't even think about that. I mean, when she slammed her gavel down and stopped the board meeting last month because she was upset that Larry actually told the truth about something, I didn't even think about this. Number 4 of their duties as a board member is to provide adequate and direct means of keeping the local citizenry informed. So she not only should have informed all of her board members, she should have, as the chair, she should have informed the local citizenry. It should have been her job. Oh, I've got information from another board member that the Hamilton County school system is curving the grades. Does the public know this? I need to inform the citizenry. I need to inform the local citizenry. That should have been the first thing that came to her mind. Hey, another one of their responsibilities is they have legislative responsibilities. We are lucky to have Ben Connor as our legislative committee member this year. They're supposed to work with local citizen groups in acquainting them with the board's legislative priorities and seek their support. He has had a couple of meetings, but he is obviously on the further left side with his priorities. So I don't know. Is he seeking support of local citizen groups?
I
on
think
that?
he's more what he wants to do is for everybody to know that he was king of the Model UN program.
I've heard him mention that a couple of times. I also saw him clap and giggle when they passed the cell phone policy, and I'm going to dig into that and figure that out. I don't know why he was so excited about that, like a little kid. Okay, so they're also supposed to represent at all times the entire school community and refuse to represent special interests or partisan politics. Okay, let's think about partisan politics, things that have been voted on and signed and statements that they've made. I remember the boys and girls sports. Well, that's a partisan politics. They signed a letter. I think that's pretty partisan. I don't think they should have done that. And I also think they tried to take a letter to the state of Tennessee back when I can't remember what was being discussed, but Ben was at the ready. He was going to take this letter to the state representatives, and it didn't get voted yes. They didn't get 6 votes.
I
So he
can't
didn't get
remember what that
voted.
was either. I can't
I'll look
remember.
that up and maybe we'll clip that. Him and Gary Keene
Gary
were
Keene.
not happy about that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was, but I will clip it and we will put it in here just so everyone can understand what we're dealing with here. We've got an extremely partisan board. We have 11 members, 6 ran as Republicans. That doesn't mean they're all Republicans. And 5 ran as Democrats. We have 1 Republican who consistently votes with the Democrats. And we have 1 Republican who wavers back and forth.
When did they change the election for school board members to be partisan? That was recent, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the last school board. Well, the last election in 2022. So before 2022 in Tennessee, school boards did not have to be partisan. And so here in Hamilton County, they ran as they didn't tell what their party was when they ran. However, you could tell how they voted and you could tell with their statements. But the Democrats were very upset that it went to partisan voting, because before, oftentimes the Democrats would parade around as if they were Republicans. They would go to Republican meetings. They had Republican donors. The donors here in Hamilton County are all mixed up. Democrats donate to Republicans. Republicans donate to Democrats. It's very confusing. Okay, so far we've gone over 2 ways that you can engage with your school system. The very last resort that Tanya mentioned earlier is a delegation. That's your last step. That's like when you've talked to the teacher, talked to the counselor, talked to the principal, talked to the superintendent, talked to the community superintendent, had meetings with the attorney. Like the very last straw is when a parent gets so exasperated that they actually have to show up at a board meeting at 4:30 and stand in front of that podium and give their grievance. And that's what that podium is for. That podium is so that the community, the taxpayers, can give their grievances to their elected officials. I mean, read the Constitution, Hamilton County.
I would like to suggest for people to go watch the last delegation that was given by a parent of a 4th grader. And it just absolutely broke my heart because of what the student is being taught.
That was very sad. And you could tell that the mother was very frustrated.
And so we know how often they get back to us and respond to us. So I just wonder if they've responded to that mom.
And if they have responded, is her grievance resolved, or are they going to take the side of the person who did that assignment? Okay, so your very last resort is a delegation. And like Tanya said, you need to find out who your board members are, put their emails in your phone, put their phone numbers in your phone. If anything, I remember when my kids were in school, I had a problem with the bus back in the 2000s, and Rhonda Thurman was my school board member. I didn't know her, and I sent her an email, and she was Johnny on the spot. and she got that issue resolved. And next thing you know, that bus driver didn't work for Hamilton County anymore. So school board members can be your advocates, and they will get things done. Next is the community superintendent. So Hamilton County has the county and the schools broken up into, they're broken up, I guess they call them districts. I don't know what they call them, but so you have voting districts. We have 11 voting districts, but the schools also have these little districts that they've created, and they have like community superintendents that will be over several schools. So there's 79 schools in Hamilton County, and they have several community superintendents who are kind of over the top of the principal. I don't think the principals answer to them though, do they?
Rebecca, those communities are called learning communities. And yes, the principals do in fact answer to them. The learning communities are Harrison Bay Community, Midtown Community, Missionary Ridge Community, North River Community, and Rock Point Community. And if you look up the learning communities, you can click on them, and it tells you Harrison Bay has Appison Elementary, CSLA, East Brainerd, Ottawa, Snow Hill, Wallace A. Smith, Westview Elementary, Wolf Teeber Creek Elementary. Then it lists the secondary schools: Brown Middle, Central High, East Hamilton Middle, East Hamilton High, Hunter Middle, Middle, Ottawa High. So you can find those. You can just look up HCDE learning communities, and you can find out what community your child's school is in and who the community superintendent is of that learning community.
Gotcha. Okay. So that would be, if you can't deal with a principal, I guess you would end up talking to someone who's a community superintendent. Then you have the superintendent and his deputy. So the superintendent is hired by the board. A lot of people probably remember when Brian Johnson just up and left the school system with no notice, and they had to bring in a temporary superintendent, Nakia Towns, for a little while. And she promised that she would not run, or she would not apply for the superintendent position. So they whittled it down to 3 candidates. Two were from out of town, and one was Justin Robertson. He's come up through the school system. We'll do a podcast on him someday. And so Justin Robertson got the position. He's a local boy, and a lot of people it's good to have someone local be a superintendent over the schools because they know the history, they know what's going on. So we had high hopes for Justin. So the school board is Justin's boss, but Justin is the deputy superintendent's boss. So Justin, when he becomes the superintendent, he hires his staff and he makes, I guess, appointments. And so he has appointed Sonia Stewart to be his deputy superintendent. She's actually from Nashville. She hasn't been in Hamilton County for very long. I think she was a community superintendent. Brian Johnson may have brought her in. But she wasn't a teacher in the system. A lot of the stuff that happened in Nashville is now happening in Hamilton County. So seems to be a connection there. So you can always call them. You can call Justin Robertson directly, and you have the right to email him. His email address is listed on the school system website. Just be ready with the facts, any policies that have been violated, a timeline of anything that you have an issue with. If you need help finding information, or you need help researching state laws, policies, procedures, Moms for Liberty is always here to help. You can send us an anonymous message, email us, send us a message, text, or call Tanya. And we can always help you with research. We can also help you with previously known issues that align with whatever you're dealing with. So before you call Justin, try to work with the principal. It's sort of the same approach. Just be prepared. The principal is ready for you. There's some great principals in our county. We've heard wonderful testimonies about principals. They put up with a lot. They have to keep a lot of plates in the air. They deal with families, They deal with superintendent, they deal with the community superintendent, they have to manage their staff, they have to make sure, the curriculum stays on track. They've got a lot of responsibility, but they also have a lot of help. A lot of schools have 2 or 3 principals and assistants. So don't feel like you're putting a burden on them to email them or call them. That's what they're there for. All right. We're going to dig into this one a little bit deeper, because your very first advocate in the school system should always be your child's teacher. Our recommendation is the very best approach with a teacher is to build a relationship. Don't go in, with all of the bells and whistles. Just everybody knows if you want a friend, be a friend. So just be a friend to the teacher, ask them what they need. If you have questions, like I said, bring them to them. Just be open and honest and tell them, I've heard that this and this and this is going on in the school system. How do you feel about it? What's going on in your classroom? How do you teach this? Teachers are ready and willing most of the time to have relationships with parents, because they need help. I mean, they will be the first to tell you they need help, and they want parent support. And you'll be able to gauge what kind of teacher you're dealing with pretty quickly, whether they're on your side or whether they don't want parent involvement. You can tell. Get in communication with the student's counselor, their guidance counselor. Figure out who the seed coach is. Have a conversation with them and let them know, how you feel about all of this social emotional learning stuff. Some people are, on board with it. If you are, it's America. But if you're not, this is America. Let them know how you feel. Coaches are always a good advocate. If your kids are in sports, they will go to the utter end of the earth for these kids. Secretaries are great. They're usually very sweet, and that's why they're in that position. They're easy to deal with, and they know a lot about everything. So I don't know, Tanya, you're from the school system. So what would your advice be as far as how a parent can approach the teacher?
So I would say that everything you just said is accurate. As a former teacher, I loved when parents reached out to me. I needed all the help I could get. So hopefully you get that response from a teacher that you reach out to, and you can build that relationship with them, and the student knows that you are communicating with one another, and that can make the life of everyone a lot less difficult during the school year. So if a student knows that there is communication between a teacher and a parent, they are usually more likely to come in and get to work and do what they're supposed to do. And we can talk about the code of acceptable behavior. There is a code of acceptable behavior, whether people know it or not. It's unfortunate that, like I said, Justin uses this word autonomy, and he says that principals are allowed to have autonomy with the code of acceptable behavior. And I think that every school should be following that code of acceptable behavior just exactly the way that it is said. When I was finishing teaching before I resigned, we had these carbon copies that we were having to fill out and check off everything that we were having to go through when we were having an issue with a student. And there were 10 things that we had to do before we could even call an admin for help. So if a teacher calls you, work with them. And like I said, in the beginning of the year, you find out who your students' teachers are, send them a message, say, hey, this is my number. This is what I expect of my student or my child. And please respond to me, ask for a response so that you know that they got it, and keep that communication open. And you'll find very quickly which teachers are going to respond to you and which teachers are not.
All right, so we're just going to go over a couple of your resources that you're going to have available. We'll put images of these on the screen. If you have any questions about these systems or these processes, of course, ask the school system, but you can ask us as well, because Tanya was a teacher, Jessica was a teacher, and they know how to navigate these systems. I was a parent. I had to get in, had a student in the school system, so I know how to navigate some of these systems. So PowerSchool is going to be where you find grades, attendance, and those forms that you can opt out of. So keep in mind that you have the right to opt out of surveys. You have the right to opt out of all this counselor stuff. You have the right to opt out of vaccinations. You have the right to opt out of a lot of stuff. They're your students. They're your children. You set the tone. You manage their experience in the school system. If they give you any pushback about opt-outs, let us know. Canvas, Tanya mentioned that before. I think that's where the assignments are located. Is that correct?
It depends on the teacher. It was pushed really hard before COVID hit. And then after COVID hit, it was pushed even harder. So you were supposed to put every bit of curriculum and assignments in that platform that is on the Chromebook. There is a way for parents to log in to Canvas also. I'll have to do some research to find all of that information out again, because I have not been doing it, but I do know that teachers communicate through Canvas, students communicate through Canvas. So you do want to check your student's Chromebook and look at the Canvas platform and see what teachers are using it. A lot of teachers put the digital textbooks in that platform for the students to use, and that's where their assignments are. Again, we have also said, even though they have a digital copy of their textbook, you need to request for a paper copy as well. I just talked about the Code of Acceptable Behavior. That is on the website, Hamilton County Department of Education. You can go look at it and you can decide for yourself if the school is following that. And if they are not, I would have some communication with the school about that.
Yes. And then all schools have an open library search. We will put the link for that in this episode, and you can go search books for your student at the schools. That's a state law that recently passed, that the schools are required to catalog all their books, which according to Tanya, they've always been required to catalog their books. Nothing new. They just acted like it was new. And then the public is able to access the library search for each individual school. Email communication, phone calls, and parent-teacher conferences. I know they still do parent-teacher conferences. I don't know if they do that twice a year.
I would say it depends on the school when they have conferences, but it is.
Yeah, I'll look that policy up and we'll put it out there just so people know.
There is a parent-teacher conference night, but you don't have to wait for that night to have a conference with a teacher. If you have a problem, you need to immediately reach out to that teacher and ask them for a conference. It may be a week before you get one. If it's not, it just depends on the level of severity, but you should be able to schedule a conference quickly with a teacher about your child. And to comment about the open library search, yes, I don't know why these teachers flipped out about that, because I remember my first year teaching, sitting in my classroom floor for days, for hours each day, cataloging my books. So I'm not sure where the uproar was about that for teachers, but I would assume that a teacher going into teaching or having been teaching would have already had their books cataloged so they would know what their students are carrying out of their classroom. I don't understand that. Boggles
Maybe
my
they
mind.
didn't want, people to know what books they had in their classroom. I do know that some books that were in the classrooms before the cataloging are no longer in the classrooms. So I guess they had to get rid of some that they didn't think they needed to catalog. All right, and last but not least, Moms for Liberty Hamilton County is always ready and willing to help you in any way that we can. We have relationships with school employees, administrators, the school board attorney, the board members. We even have a relationship with Justin Robertson. And when he's gone, we'll build a relationship with the next superintendent. We have tons of resources available on our local Moms for Liberty website, the national website. And if we don't have an answer, we can find it by collaborating with over 400 other chapters across the nation. Did I get that number right?
That's correct.
We've got this.
We do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please go to Rumble and find M4L Hamilton TN. Click follow and turn on notifications, as well as on YouTube at Moms for Liberty Chattanooga, and click on subscribe and turn on notifications. Remember, this is our 7th episode, and we have covered a lot in previous episodes. So go back and listen if you haven't already, and please share these podcasts with your family and friends. You can also visit our website, as Rebecca said, and connect with us on social media. Those links will be in the description of this podcast. This is Tanya and Rebecca signing off until the next episode. We are here for the kids, and we will see you next time.